Hello again, it's Matt from Christopher Shaw here with my colleague James Tiller, and we are inviting back the same guest as our last one. It's our friend over at VeriSmart, Craig. Welcome, Craig. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good, good, good. Thank you for staying on and joining us for part two. This one's one that's very, very close to our daily operation. This is going to be about EPC regulation. This is something which is unavoidable, won't go away, and is getting tougher by the year. This is obviously all to do with energy standards. It's obviously a very hot topic with heating bills, and it's very much at the forefront, I think, of current political climates. It does then impact into the rental sector, and our landlords obviously need to be aware of these future changes. So hopefully we'll cover a few of these today. We'll scare the life out of our landlords, but hopefully give them a path and a plan to implement and answer any obviously questions they've got about EPCs. I still think there might be a few landlords out there, a few landlords that might still not know what EPCs are and why they're so important, but they are probably one of the most important documents now that we have to serve when we obviously sign off our tenancies. So 2020 last year, middle of lockdown or coming out of lockdown, the 1st of April, it became mandatory to have your property energy standard to an E or higher. And for those who don't understand that, if you go into Currys or PC World or other stores available, you'll see a graph on an appliance. It will have A to E, and obviously the higher the score, the better, A being the best, E being the worst. We have these on properties as well, and an E was the minimum legal standard for renting a property out in the UK, but that is due to change. Tell us a bit more about that, Craig.
Yeah, so a few years ago, the idea that was being floated about was by the government was that they wanted to achieve an EPC rating of C in all domestic properties by 2030. That's now changed, and now the target is for 2025, so only 4 years away. What it will be first is any new tenancies over 6 months in length. Those properties will be required to have a EPC of C, and the rest will be rolled out for existing and long-term lets by 2028. So that's a big change. Also, the other big change is going to be the fines. So a current breach of EPC, worst case scenario, is a fine of £5,000. That is going to go up to £30,000. So that is a huge, I believe that's now confirmed. What I can do at the end of this is I can send you a white paper that you might want to put a link into the video for your landlords to have, and it's got all this information in, but I'm pretty sure it's now going to go up from 2025. It'll be a £30,000 fine per property. So you can imagine if someone's got multiple properties and multiple EPC problems, that's going to rack up pretty quickly.
Yeah, that is scary. I mean, we talk quite a lot off camera, and we've talked about the types of properties that we have in Bournemouth. We don't have a lot of new builds here, unless you're talking high-end new build apartment blocks. We are dealing with older recycled properties and properties that have been modernized to a degree. And we've seen a few EPCs lately where it says there is no room for improvement. It might be a D or something like that, and it says no room for improvement. Do you think there'll be exemptions to these new standards?
As far as we know, there will still be an exemption process. At the moment, you have several categories of which you can get an exemption under. Listed buildings, for example. The main one that's being discussed in more detail is the affordability exemption. So at the moment, a landlord is only required to spend a total of £3,500, which includes VAT, on improvements to try and bring an EPC up. So, for example, if you got given a £10,000 bill, which is what it was needed in order to get your EPC up to an E at the moment, you would only be required to pay £3,500. At that point, you would say, well, I've done everything I can, and you'd be able to get an exemption. So it's going to change. So again, I believe as of 2025, that cap of £3,500, including VAT, become £10,000, including VAT. So again, that's a big jump. That's what a landlord would be required to spend in order to get in order to bring the improvements up to the required level. So it sounds horrible and scary from a landlord's point of view, because you're thinking that's 3 times more. There'll be different degrees of help, which we'll discuss a bit later. But yeah, the affordability exemption is going to be the main one that I think people will look at, especially for properties when there's not much you can do, and you can only do what you can do. The affordability exemption is based on turnover and profit. So I don't know how it's going to be regulated, but it's going to be okay. So the property cost you this much a year, you're renting it out for this year, and they'll do the affordability exemption based on that profit. That's how that's going to work.
So casting our mind back to 2018, when they started you had to get you level to E for new tenancies and then all the rest of it. That was hard enough as it was then to get properties from wherever they were to make sure they met that E standard. Is getting to C realistic? Is that going to be? How difficult a task is that going to be?
Well, what you were just saying at the moment in terms of the properties, just getting them to E, from my experience, realistically, most properties with gas central heating and double glazing should achieve an E at the moment.
Yeah.
Primarily, it's flats with electric heating, especially if they're top floor flats and they've only got a flat roof. That's where the problems come in. The jump to C from E sounds ambitious and to a degree a little unrealistic. But we know there is going to be an overhaul into the RDSAP software, which is used to produce EPC. So a domestic energy assessor like myself, we have software called RDSAP. That's how we produce an energy performance certificate. It's slightly different software to just SAP, which is what they use to produce an EPC for new builds, because they do it off plan. They use the schematics. So an example at the moment, in the last few years, we've seen an increase in low cost electrical heating systems. So electrical heating has always been a problem for EPCs. But at the moment, you have a one score fits all for electrical heating, not including storage heaters or anything that's on a dual tariff. So if you think an old horrible electric radiator with a dial on the front that costs you, heaven and earth just to use, compared to a brand new Roente electric radiator, which apparently only costs a penny an hour. Unfortunately, on an EPC, they go down as exactly the same type of heater. So we quite often come up against landlords saying, well, I've just spent X, Y, and Z on all this new system. Why is my EPC no better? We don't have the flexibility to change that. So electrical boilers and heating systems, they are going to have to overhaul the software in order to make it more efficient. I believe from the last seminar I sat on, something, assuming all goes well, was supposed to start in early 2022 in order to, battle that element.
I think that would be great, because we've had that same problem with the Rointe, or Roint as I call them, the quantum dimplex heaters. So
Yes.
Night storage has got a terrible reputation, and I'm not a big fan. My first flat I bought had night storage heaters, and they barely ever worked. And tenants don't like them. This is where the crux comes in. Tenants don't really like these kind of energy saving heaters because they're not actually that user friendly. But like you said, the current EPC system seems to favour them over instant heat systems, which are on a premium tariff.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the software doesn't work from what's practical. It works from what numbers are lowest.
Yeah.
So the storage heaters, they charge up overnight on the economy 7 tariff. The lower tariff release heat during the day. So on paper, they are more efficient. Some of the older ones, you don't end up any better off. I know now with the high retention storage heaters that are recommended, which is usually the quantum range that you referred to a minute ago, it's supposed to be a lot better. Again,
very expensive as well.
Expensive outlay, but on paper they are more efficient. Even though, I could be pronouncing it wrong. The Roente ones, they're supposed to be a penny an hour, I've been told.
Well, we've had also the exact same issue described as well. We had a top floor flat in a block of flats with a flat roof. The landlord had to put in those quantum heaters. Spend just over £3,500. So they couldn't be exempt because of that, and they've just scraped an E. But next time, I think they'll probably have to put a whole new roof on the flat to be able to meet these EPC standards. now, but that's obviously something to be looked into when it happens. But so right now, how can landlords best prepare for this? What can they do now to help prepare them? And is there any help available for them?
So in terms of what they can do now to prepare for the change, so the government is suggesting what they're calling a fabric approach. So effectively do what you can now to get things moving in the right direction. So things like increasing depth of loft installation, cavity wall installation is still a recommendation. Thermostat control valves on radiator, so you can put them up and down. LED light bulbs, all of these things have got a relatively low cost compared to things like heat pumps or solar panels, and can get your score moving in the right direction. That's the approach they're being told to look at. So what you may find is people that have not really considered the EPC as something they need to worry about, as long as they've got the right mark on it and they can rent it out, that's all they care about. There's probably recommendations on there that could already get them to where they need to be without having to spend too much. It all comes down to the property and how they're made up. So the fabric approach is what the government are recommending. In terms of support available to landlords, there are always government-backed schemes or council-backed schemes available. So it depends on the council, it depends on the area, what's available at the time. The latest one that we've just started hearing about is they will offer you a £5,000 grant to replace your gas boiler with an air source heat pump. So obviously gas boilers, I think, are going to be outlawed by, I think it's 2035, they won't be able to sell them anymore. So air source heat pumps are the latest thing. But the installation for a heat pump is roughly, depending on your property and the type of pump, between £10,000 and £18,000, that sort of ballpark. So £5,000 off that, excuse me, helps, but certainly doesn't cover the cost. But what I've just heard recently, just yesterday, is although they've made these grants available, the grants are only going to be for 90,000 homes, and that's over the next 3 years. So there are a lot more than 90,000 homes in the country. So that's only going to fix a small amount, but that is an example of something that is available. There are always different green deals. It used to be you could get cavity wall installation for free. There's a thing with, I know certain houses, certain people on certain benefits, they still get cavity wall or loft insulation. But there's some places you can look. So there is the, if you go online, you have the Energy Company Obligation Funding, Green Deal Finance, Green Homes Grant, there's another one, Simple Energy Advice website. All of these places have information on where you can get different grants and help towards improving the energy of your property.
That's brilliant. I mean, for landlords who maybe aren't aware, the EPCs are actually stored on a national register. So if you're not sure what your EPC is, or you haven't looked at it in a while, you can actually go on and find that really easily. Just type in EPC register on Google, and it will take you to the national register. All you need to do is choose a domestic register, go on and put your postcode in, and it'll bring up all the properties in your block, your road, and you can just download it. They've changed the format now, so it doesn't actually download as a PDF. It just opens up as a document, and you can see your score instantly on there. So we obviously will record EPCs, and if we see a problem, it will come up. But I think it'll be advisable for landlords to take the bull by the horns themselves as well, and start future planning, because obviously we can't do that for everyone. But for them to check their EPCs now and read, like you said, read those comments where it says about potential improvements.
I've got a question, which I apologise for catching you off the hop on this one, Craig. So on the report, it might give its recommendations, and it might say that you need to do X to get a few points up, Y to get a few points up, and so on. Is it a building block approach? So if you do the first bit, then you get those points, or is it that you go for a slightly more expensive recommendation, like you say it was cavity insulation or something like that, that might cost £5,000 to £10,000. Say you did that, would that skip ahead some of the smaller ones and give you bigger jump, or do you have to do those other bits first to be able to get? Because you sometimes see it jumping about all over the place.
Yeah, so it should display it in increments, and it should say so. So, for example, change your light bulbs and you'll be here. You know, put new insulation and you'll be here. So you can't obviously just change the light bulbs and get up here.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have to follow those blocks in order to get to the score, or the highest possible score available. So I mean, for landlords, it's definitely worth looking into now and getting out ahead of this. You've got 4 years at the moment. I say there will be different exemptions. I imagine some of the exemptions we've got at the moment, they will probably carry on. They may be changed in terms of their format and their application, but they can't just say everybody's got to have everything by 2025, because there aren't resources available at the moment for every single property to be able to achieve that. You know, like we said earlier, with some of the properties that they're just not going to be able to do it. So there has to be different exemptions available. But if you're a landlord and you're concerned about this, look where your EPC is now at the moment. You may currently have an E or a D, and you may have recommendations on there that can get you to a C. And those recommendations may not be, I mean, obviously they're going to be a cost, but the cost now, when there's only a £3,500, I say only, when there's a £3,500 cap in place, compared to leaving it, and then in 2025 thinking, now I've got to do something about it, and you have to spend up to £10,000, it's a no-brainer to look at it now. If you can do it and get to a C before, then you don't have to worry about it in 2025, because you've already got the grade.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it with the EICRs. If people have left it, you know, to the last minute or beyond the actual date, which is sadly the case, is they struggle to get tradesmen.
Yep.
You struggle to get tradesmen in to do the work, so that will be another thing I can see.
And it's the last thing you want to be running around trying to do before letting a property. Obviously, it would flag up pretty early doors, because you have to have an EPC to market the property. So it would flag up pretty early in the process that you would need to get upgrade your rating. So if there's a problem, and obviously that's the kind of thing that we would track at that point anyway, but it's still a big thing, and a lot to take in. So I think that information has been really useful, Craig. Thank you very much for talking us through.
No problem at all.
One last one, Craig, for you with EPCs. Obviously, they last quite a long time. They're 10 years. 10 years they last for EPCs, and I believe there was changes to the way they were graded a few years ago. Is that correct? Would it be worth, for example, someone who's got an 8-year-old EPC, before they go ahead and do wholesale works to the property, maybe to get a reassessment done to just check that it's not graded slightly differently to how it was 8 years ago?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If your EPC has only got a couple of years left, I mean, it's definitely, first of all, if you've done, since, let's say someone bought a property, they had an EPC and they've done some work themselves, so maybe they've changed loft insulation, maybe they put in a new boiler at some point,
new windows.
I mean, technically, if something like that is done, so if the fabric of a property is changed, a new EPC is supposed to be carried out anyway, but people don't do it, and it doesn't usually, flag up until the next EPC is done. But certainly, if you're unsure about your current EPC score, if you're looking at it and thinking something doesn't look right on there, so for example, maybe it says 100 mil insulation in the loft, and when you go up there you can see it's this deep, then it's definitely worth getting another EPC done, because what you want to do before you spend any great deal of money is make sure your score is accurate. And unfortunately, as I was talking to you off camera earlier, although EPCs are regulated and there's an audit process, we on a very regular basis come up against something and think this score is just not, it's not possible to have achieved that. Something major has been missed. I had a property where they forgot to include the second and third floor.
Wow.
So the property was only heating a very small flat effectively, as opposed to a house. We've had properties where they don't want to enter the loft, so the loft insulation isn't recorded even though it was accessible. Heat escapes through the roof of a house. That's one of the most important things, is your insulation up there. We have another example would be where we have a property and the whole place says double glazing, and when we get there it's single glazing. And unfortunately, again, that's where you'll have someone who is prepared to, I don't want to say bend the rules, because it's outright lying sometimes in order to help someone put an EPC through. And sadly, that's the nature of it. We always try to do the most accurate and best EPC we can. And if it takes us longer, then so be it, as long as we get it right. But certainly if you've got an EPC and you think something doesn't look right, or if it's, you know, only got a year or two left, the way EPCs are scored changes on a, you know, every sort of 5 years they review it. So a boiler back then that may have only got X amount of points may now get Y. So it's definitely worth looking into, especially if you have done any work yourself or changed anything in there.
I think it's a brilliant tip. So any landlords that are watching this, if you are unsure or your EPC is due to expire or is coming up to its end date, feel free to reach out to us, and we can connect you to Craig and the team at VeriSmart, and you can get a reassessment done, and then kind of at least you know where to go. So Craig, that's really useful. EPCs are a hot topic always in this office, and it's always good to bring you on. Obviously, you're very knowledgeable, and we always learn a bit when we come on these videos. So thank you so much for coming again. And I'm sure we'll find another topic for you to help us out on very soon.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said earlier, there's a white paper that's been made available, which has got all the information about the 2025 changes and what's in store. It's 50 or so pages, but if anybody wants to read it, I'll send you over the link. And if you want to include it in the video or just have it accessible, then for your landlords, then yeah, I think it's a good place to start.
We'll put that on a blog on our website to follow up with this. If this is on a newsletter format, we'll put it below the newsletter text. But if you're watching this on YouTube, then head across to our website. We'll put it on a blog post there, and you can find that white paper and have a good old read of those 50 pages, and hopefully that'll help. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.